So I did a little background, the research on you, but if you can give everyone at home and the audience a little bit more an intro of yourself.
Sure. So I arrived in Texas about a year and a half ago, moved from California. I actually lived in California for a long time, more than 30 years. Came to California for college, studied in college to be an engineer, worked as an engineer for a while, then as a project manager and a program manager working with engineers in high tech and in IT. So many years in that career. Started investing part-time in single family and duplexes and triplexes while I was working in my W-2 job, and really developed a taste for that. Early on in my investing career, as I was investing in those types of properties, I also learned about syndication and learned about how people invest in larger commercial multifamily properties, and realized that that could be an excellent way to scale up my business. Investing in small things like duplexes and triplexes, it's an interesting thing to do. It can provide fantastic returns, but it's a lot of work. Even if you do it in what you might call a passive role, really I call that semi-passive. If you hire a property manager and you let somebody else deal with tenants, what they call tenants, toilets, and trash. Even if you do that, even if you hire somebody, it tends to be somewhat time consuming because a lot of decisions come your way. You have to be interacting with the property manager pretty regularly to figure out what to do about various situations. If a tenant's not paying, or if a repair is needed and you need some bids on the work, it's a fairly significant time commitment. And I figured by scaling up, by buying bigger things, it might be a similar time commitment, but at a larger scale, with better potential for returns on investment. Also, one nice thing about syndication is I bring a lot of people with me. I've got my co-GPs, my co-sponsors, as well as my limited partners, my passive investors, who get to participate with me. And so when I'm doing things at a larger scale with commercial multifamily, it allows me to impact more people, which is really nice. So anyway, as I was learning about syndication, I initially invested as a passive investor. I didn't decide right off the bat I wanted to be a sponsor. I figured, okay, I'm going to learn about syndication. I'm going to understand the model and figure out what I want my role to be. I could continue to invest passively in syndications, or I could decide to move into the active role. So I invested in probably a dozen or so syndications passively, investing in other people's deals and learning as much as I could. And I used a lot of different tools to learn. I attended meetups. I read books. I listened to podcasts. I read articles and blogs. I got on Bigger Pockets and learned what I could about multifamily from there. So really a full court press on trying to develop my knowledge base and educate myself on the business. Once I had done that and I had invested in a number of deals and learned through those, those experiences, I decided, yes, I do want to do active syndications. I want to be on the sponsorship side. Right about that time is when I moved to Texas, and I decided at that time I would leave my W-2 job and go full-time into real estate. So about a year and a half ago, that's when I left my job, actually coming up on 2 years now, left my job and decided to pursue real estate investing as a full-time career. Since then, I've done 5 deals, I think, in contract for 2 more, totaling around 1,200 doors as a sponsor. I've also done 2 deals as a sponsor or managing partner for ground up development. So we've got a couple of projects going. One that's 20 acres, about half an hour south of Austin, that we're going to try to turn into townhomes, and another 10 acres a little bit east of Austin that we're working on to develop an apartment complex. The townhomes, we're aiming for something like 200 to 240 townhomes. The apartment complex is looking like about 250 units. So I'm having a really good time. I'm having fun working on deals, partnering up with different combinations of people to get these deals done, and helping my my passive investors get a good return on their money. So that's kind of a long answer to your question. My
That
background.
brings up that brings up a lot of questions in terms of you said you were passively investing in 12 deals, and during that time you were also increasing your knowledge and exposure and network. So what was that time period like? And then what was the aha moment when you decided to finally commit to the active role?
I think there were probably two moments like that. So one of my early passive deals, I talked to the sponsors of the deals and I got them to let me dial into their weekly calls with the property manager. So the sponsors were doing what you call asset management, meaning they were managing the asset, making the big decisions about what the renovation plan was going to be, where to put rents, what to do about delinquent tenants, and so forth. But the property manager was doing the day-to-day, getting units leased up, managing the contractors who were doing the renovations, that sort of thing. And so the weekly calls were to manage that process. And so when issues would arise, when challenges would come up, they would talk through those challenges. Or sometimes the weekly calls were just focused on the metrics. How are we doing on leasing up? How are we doing on getting people to come for appointments or submit rental applications and so forth? And so I got the sponsor to let me dial into those calls, and so I would just dial in and go on mute and listen for an hour a week. And that was a really great element of my education. One of the things that helped me understand, besides just the nuts and bolts, the day-to-day operation, was, hey, this isn't rocket science. It's not that difficult. And not only that, but a lot of the skills are very similar to what I was doing in my professional job as a program manager. Managing an asset, managing a property manager takes a lot of the same skills and a lot of the same thought processes as managing programs in high tech. And so I figured, hey, I can do this. It's not out of my realm. I don't have to, go back to college. I don't have to get a new degree. I don't have to become a different person. I can do this with a lot of the same skills that I already understand. And, I just need to partner up with folks who have done it before and work through it. So that was one, I guess, aha moment. The next one was after I arrived in Texas. I still was a little bit unsure about how to make that transition from passive to active, how to actually get a deal, get it under contract, get funding for it, find investors, persuade investors to invest in the deal, and so forth. So really the nitty gritty of sponsorship. Found a mentorship program that I joined by someone who runs a program based in Dallas, but has students all over the country, especially in Texas. And so I joined that mentorship program, and that helped expose me to a network of people. It probably has about 1,500 people in that mentorship program. So I met lots and lots of people who are actively sponsoring deals, are getting deals under contract, and locking them up and purchasing them and running them and selling them for a profit. And so just being in that environment, being with people who are doing it successfully, sort of broke down that barrier for me. So I developed a lot of relationships with folks in that group that helped build my confidence, so that when I was talking to folks outside the group, I felt comfortable, telling them about deals and working with them on whatever base I needed to, whether it was a passive investor or a realtor or a lender. And so that was sort of the second big step for me, was when I joined that network of people, that mentorship program. It helped me build the confidence to say, yes, I can do this. I can make this happen.
Awesome. And I guess fast forwarding a year and a half later, now that you're self-employed, do you have an entire team that you manage, or do you delegate tasks to others on a team?
So I love to partner up with folks who I can work with on various bases. I try really hard not to put myself in a position where I need to manage people. I managed people in my W-2 job for a very long time. And honestly, it just wasn't the most fun part of my job for me. I did it because I had to, but it wasn't something that, I leaped out of bed and said, boy, I can't wait to, deal with a performance issue, or, figure out how I'm going to allocate my 2% salary increases this year or whatever. So the prospect of managing people to me is not all that appealing, but I love partnering. And so that's how I've done the deals that I've done, is partnering with various combinations of people. So the first deal that I did was a 42 unit in Austin. And that one was, I partnered up with a couple of folks who they actually got the deal under contract and were struggling to figure out how to fund the deal. And in particular, they needed to get some early, what we call risk capital, which is money that the sponsors have to put up in advance of having the deal actually come to fruition. If for some reason the deal falls apart, that money is a risk. The sponsors could lose that money altogether. And so that's why it's called risk capital. You try to mitigate that risk by being careful in your due diligence. But that's what these two gentlemen that I partnered up with needed, was some help with the risk capital. So specifically, that was earnest money deposits, fees to get the loan application started, some legal fees. So I helped them out with that. But moreover, we partnered up together to effect the purchase and manage the asset. So we met in February of last year, decided almost immediately to move forward on the deal that we were working on. You can say hello to my dog back there. Anyway, so partnered up, decided to move forward on the deal together in February and closed in April. And so we've been managing that property since April. Since then, I've done one more deal with them that's already closed, and in contract with them on two more deals that we're hoping to close within the next couple of months.
Wow. So you made, I guess when you left your W-2 job, there was no regret. You're like, I'm very committed. And now that you have so many deals under, two deals under contract, and you have other syndication opportunities. So I guess, do you have any regrets leaving, or is it any
not at all.
decision?
Really glad I made the decision. I'm glad I came to Texas, because it's a much better place to do business, much friendlier to landlords than California. And I'm glad that I left my W-2 job and I'm now doing real estate full time. It's been a great transition, and no regrets at all about the decision.
That's what I often hear from many syndicators. That's the common trend. I guess as a veteran in the industry, what advice do you have for new syndicators and passive investors?
So I guess two things I would share. One is the two things are education and partnership. So early on, focus on your education and pursue education in every way you can. Like I said, I attended meetups, I listened to podcasts, I read books, subscribed to magazines, read blogs. Every bit of information I could get my hands on, I use that to further my education. And then partnership. Be ready to partner up with people. Don't think of real estate as something you do alone. That was one of my early limiting beliefs. Before I was in syndication, when I was buying single family, duplex, triplex, I thought, okay, real estate's fine, but the only things I can buy are things I can afford on my own. So if I'm going to buy a property, I'm going to need to come up with 20 to 25% of the price of the property as the down payment, and the bank will come up with the rest, and that's as far as I can go. So if I want to think about multi-million-dollar assets, then I've got to be ready to come up with $1 million in a down payment. That was my limiting belief. When I figured out, when I learned about the syndication model and figured out that I could partner up with folks to do syndications, that demolished that limiting belief. Now I understand that I can come in with a relatively small amount of my own money, but bring to bear a lot of other people's money in different ways. So not only the bank loan, but limited partners bring a lot of the equity. My co-sponsors bring some of the equity. And so really I'm closing multi-million-dollar deals, bringing only say $50,000 to $100,000 of my own personal funds into a deal. So one deal in particular that I closed in November, it was a $70 million purchase. I partnered up with some folks who are much more senior to me in the syndication space. Wanted to partner with those folks because I knew I could learn from them. So we closed on that $70 million deal, and I've got $100,000 into that deal. So if you think about it, the leverage for that is, what is it, 700 to 1? Maybe 0.15% was my personal investment into that $70 million purchase. And now I'm a part owner in that asset. The fraction of the asset that I own is almost irrelevant. More importantly, I'm part of the team that is managing that asset. And now I can learn from that team, interact with that team, maybe do more deals with that team. I can put that deal on my resume and tell people about it, that I'm part of that deal. So it brings all kinds of benefits to me. Meanwhile, that 100,000 I put into that deal, if I had gone alone, maybe I could have bought a $400,000 quad in Austin. I don't even know if you can buy a quad for that price. So instead of buying 4 units, I'm buying 330 and leveraging up between my money and my co-sponsors and my passive investors. So anyway, that's kind of a long answer to why I think partnership is important. It just allows you to scale and get into deals and learn things that there's no way you could do that without partnering up.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. And I guess my last question before we go into cash flow portal is, you mentioned you have 4 phenomenal kids on your LinkedIn bio. Do you ever encourage them? Do you encourage them to go into real estate with you?
I talk to them about it occasionally. I encourage them to follow their own path. Each of them has very different interests. My kids one's a lawyer, one's a graphic designer. One is investing in real estate, but also studying IT certifications and at the same time working at a local retailer. And one is a dietitian. So it's kind of all over the map in terms of interests and skills and backgrounds. And I'm happy with that. I love the fact that they've forged their own paths. None of them really followed in their dad's footsteps in terms of a high-tech career. My one son who's doing some real estate investing, he could potentially get involved in the syndication business at some point. The other 3 haven't really expressed any interest. If they do, I'll be happy. I'll bring them along. I'll teach them what I can. But if they don't, I'm comfortable with that too. They're wonderful people. They're great. They're all fantastic young adults that I enjoy spending time with. And that's kind of my perspective, is they got to find their own way in life.
All right. Well, you must be very proud dad.
Absolutely.
I guess when you got into syndication, did you run this idea by them, or was it more of like, they have their own lives, I will, go ahead and commit and, take on this journey?
Oh, I committed without really consulting with them. My wife was very supportive. In fact, she was an essential element of my transition. She encouraged me from a long time ago to get into real estate, and I resisted for many years. In fact, it's kind of funny, the way I got into real estate was kind of backwards. While we were in California, we decided that at some point in the future we were going to move to Austin, but we didn't know when that was going to happen. We knew it was probably a few years away. We wanted to let our youngest get out of high school and sort of settle up things in California before we moved. But we said, okay, we've made the decision. We can't do it yet. Let's invest in a property there. So just in case something weird happens with the markets, let's say California real estate collapses or Texas real estate explodes, we're protected against either of those events financially. We can still afford to make the move. It still makes financial sense for us. And so that was the rationale we used to buy a single family house in Round Rock, Texas, which was not far from where we wanted to live. So I bought that one house, and in the course of buying it, I learned a lot about not just real estate, but about real estate markets. And in particular, in many years in California, my experience with real estate was nothing cash flows. If you're going to buy something, you're buying only for appreciation, and you'll probably lose money every month on your mortgage. You'd be lucky to get a decent rent out of it. But if appreciation keeps up, you're more power to you, lucky you. And I didn't want to invest in those circumstances. I didn't want to bet on appreciation. Once I invested outside of California, I realized, hey, real estate is not the same as California everywhere. You actually can cash flow on investments on properties if you buy right. And so that single family house that I bought in Round Rock was sort of the gateway drug to, allow me to get really deep into real estate. And like I said, my wife was really essential in encouraging me and pushing me towards real estate. So all credit to her. If it weren't for her, I'd probably still be in my W-2 job and much less satisfied with my career and my life than I am now.
I guess for the appreciation part, markets like New York, yeah, there is no cash flow, right? Because it's so expensive. So yeah, that cash flow, I guess, in certain markets, especially in Texas. Texas is a hot market. Everyone from California, New York, especially with the pandemic and working from home, like everyone has just gravitated towards Texas.
Yeah, I mean, Texas already was relatively business friendly in comparison to states like California, Illinois, and New York. And since the pandemic, it's become a lot more business friendly. Not so much because Texas has changed, it's the other states have changed. They've made it much more difficult for people, small businesses, employers, anybody who wants to make a living. It's just much tougher in those states. I actually, for a little while, I was a business owner in California, and that was a very unpleasant experience. It's a hostile environment for people who are trying to make a profit. And if you do succeed by accident, California just sees you as somebody to be taxed, somebody to be poached. That's just, I got tired of that perspective, that attitude. So much happier in Texas where, it's more business friendly, it's more landlord friendly. They understand how free markets not only operate, but how they improve lives. And so, yeah, it's, a lot of people are coming to Texas. It's a magnet for people now.
Which Austin is also a hot market for a lot of my friends who graduate from Duke. They moved to Austin, and there's a whole it seems like just like New York, lots of young people, lots of exciting nightlife, restaurants, very vibrant community. So the move, it sounds like Texas is the right move for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, in fact, I've told people here, Texas now, Austin reminds me of the Bay Area 30 years ago when I first got there. There's a vibrancy, there's a dynamism, there's just sort of this attitude of, yeah, we're doing things, we're going places. And the other thing I've noticed is that back then, 30 years ago, everybody in the Bay Area that I met was from somewhere else. And that's much less true now. People aren't moving to the Bay Area because it's so expensive. Right. But now in Austin, everybody I meet is from somewhere else. People are coming here for the opportunities.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I would like to transition to some of the cash flow portal questions. So my first question is, what was your initial hesitation with using cash flow portal?
So I had previously used a tool called AppFolio, but I wasn't really committed to using that. I was really just tagging along with one of my partners who was using it. And so I was kind of a free agent in that sense, exploring, hey, I knew I needed an investor portal. Wasn't really sure which one to go with. And talked to Perry at length about cash flow portal. And based on what he told me and based on what I observed, I created a login, set up a sample deal package, and just played with the tool to get to understand it. And it met all my needs. And where it had challenges, Perry and his team were just extremely responsive. That's one of the things that for me that stands out about cash flow portal is that the customer support at least for now is just crazy good. They're just insanely responsive. When I make a request, if they agree that the request makes sense, I might see something change in the tool within the 24 hours. And even if it doesn't change, I'll get a response of some sort saying, hey, here's a workaround for the challenge you're facing, or we'll go in and update your database for you to fix this thing you're seeing. Just it's just been amazing response. And I wouldn't necessarily expect that to scale up over time, but as they polish the tool and as they improve the feature set, I don't expect to need as much customer support either. Mm-hmm. So I figure over time, as this tool transitions, I'll be able to grow with it as it grows.
Makes sense. After using the platform, have you seen any results or immediate benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I've been able to do 2 deals on the platform already and manage my investors pretty effectively. I've got, I think, 15 investors on the first one, about 23 on the second one, and things are going well. You know, I'm able to manage my investment, manage my limited partners. It's been a good experience.
Awesome. And what was the biggest challenge of using other syndication software? And how was Cashflow Portal able to solve those challenges?
So that's going to be a little bit tough for me to answer since I don't have a lot of experience with other portals. I do like Cashflow Portal's integration with the document signing process, and I know that their roadmap has that integration tightening up substantially. I'm really excited about a couple of things on their roadmap, and one of them is I think they call it digitizing the questionnaires, where I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain this well. The idea is the information that users have already entered, limited partners, you should be able to insert that into documents automatically rather than having them fill out lots of forms with information they've already put in the platform. And so I'm looking forward to that feature, the digitized signing documents, so that the sign-off process will be a little bit easier and smoother for investors. I know as I've done lots and lots of passive investments myself. I mentioned that I'd done about a dozen before becoming a syndicator. Since then, I've done more. In fact, I think I've done like 25 passive investments. And every single time I do it, I know that there's this process that I'm going to have to go through that's going to take an hour or two to get through the documents. And a lot of that is just re-entering the same information that I've entered somewhere else on the system. And so if Cashflow Portal can solve that problem, that inconvenience and inefficiency, then I think that'll go a long way to making it making a more frictionless investment process for my passive investors.
Definitely. And it gives you back more time on your calendar too. So you can you can look at other deals, invest in other deals, right? Do more research, syndicate more deals instead of spending tedious time answering those questions.
Yep, absolutely.
Can you talk more about the onboarding process? Was it streamlined, straightforward? How was it like for you and your team?
Yeah, it was no problem at all. I mean, like I said, initially I created a sample deal just to sort of play with the tool. I was able to use it both as a syndicator and as an investor, so I could see it from both sides of the equation. And from there, I just, I went through the steps that I would have gone through if it was a real investment to understand what the tool does and how it operates and what the limitations are. And I shared a lot of feedback with Perry and his team. And like I said, they were just amazingly responsive with that feedback.
Awesome. Oh, I know you mentioned a lot of features, but are there any ones in particular that you are a super fan of?
So I think right now the platform is a good platform. There aren't features that I would say, boy, this is just amazing. It's a step above other tools. But on their roadmap are some things that I think are really exciting. One of the things Perry's talked about is his marketplace for sponsors, making it. I think I forget what he compares it to, but I think of it almost like a LinkedIn, where sponsors and passive investors can connect, and passive investors can learn about new deals. So it's kind of like a merging of an investor portal and a crowd sharing and a crowdsourcing site. And I think that's got some real potential to differentiate Cashflow Portal and enable me to connect with more passive investors, which is really, I think right now, the most limiting element for my business is finding and meeting and developing relationships with passive investors who can participate in my deals. If I could raise more capital from passive investors, if I could raise twice as much capital, I could do twice as many deals. Right. So it's really that simple. So for me, if I can overcome that hurdle, if I can break down that barrier, that's a huge win. And so I'm really hopeful that this feature that's coming with the sponsor marketplace and the connections between syndicators and investors, I'm hopeful that that'll help me break down that barrier.
I also think there's merit to new investors too, like you mentioned. Based on all of the interviews with very experienced syndicators, they first started with passive investing. So the platform also adds value in terms of people like me who are pretty new and want to get into the industry but don't know how and how to network, or what deals are even out there for me to invest in. So I think it's mutually beneficial for you to raise more capital, but also for newbies like me to get exposure in the industry.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, back when I was strictly focused on passive investing, and not yet ready to make that transition to being a sponsor, I could have used something like that. It would have been great, because I didn't know any syndicators, and then I knew one syndicator. So, okay, tell me about your deals, and then I kind of got stuck for like 6 months. Like, okay, I know that one syndicator. How do I find more? And I was just clueless, right? I was attending meetups, but the meetups really only had that one syndicator, and then other people who hoped to break into the business, but it was really this sort of chasm of, how do I cross this boundary of, as a passive investor, I want to meet syndicators, but I don't know where to find them. So yeah, I agree with you. It's a great feature that can help passive investors too.
I have a few more questions. It sounds like you have lots of emails coming in.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were hearing
no worries.
sound effects.
You're a busy man. You're a busy man. I completely understand. What would you recommend? Would you recommend Cashflow Portal to your fellow syndicators or passive investors? Sounds like, I guess.
Yeah, I think we talked about the reasons why, but yeah, I would definitely recommend it.
And would you encourage others to try Cashflow Portal, perhaps those who are hesitant in switching?
Oh, of course. I mean, it's easy enough to create a login and play around with the tool, both as a syndicator as an investor. And that'll give you a pretty good idea of what it can do. So folks who do have a lot of experience with other platforms, it's not that hard to compare.
Right. And then the last question is, anything you want to share with our Cashflow audience?
Wow. I guess the only closing thought I might say is, if you're hesitant about the business, learn what you can and invest, move forward. It's a great business to be in, whether you're active or passive. And so, I hope to connect with and meet lots of new investors through Cashflow Portal.